Lesson 8.8. Our learning targets for today are that we can model decimal fractions in various ways so that we can compare and order decimal fractions, and we'll know that we're successful when we can use the greater than, less than, and equal sign to describe the relationships between decimal fractions. Over the past couple days, we have been looking at decimal fractions. I would like for you to go ahead and take a minute to pause this video and write which decimal fraction is represented by each arrow on this number line. Hopefully you were able to recognize that the smaller jumps are hundredths on this line and that the ones with the larger benchmarks are the tenths. So the whole number is between 1 and 2. So that means that every one of these whole numbers is going to be 1. This one is going to be 1 and 1/10. And then we are going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hundredths. And I would say this, 1 and 18 hundredths. For our next arrow, I know that the whole number is going to be 1 again, as it is between the number 1 and 2. I will count my tenths first because they're a larger benchmark. So 10, 20, 30, 40. So that means I have 4 tenths. And I will count the smaller jumps, which are my hundredths. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hundredths. I would say this as 1 and 47 hundredths. For the third arrow, I went ahead and cleared my number line, and I'm going to continue to count the same way I was before. I'm going to count my tenths first. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tenths. I also know my whole number is 1 still. So I have 7 tenths, and I'm going to count my hundredths, which is 1, 2 hundredths. I would say this, 1 and 72 hundredths. For my last arrow, I'm going to continue to count from my 7 tenths, 1 and 7 tenths. And I'm going to go 8 tenths, 9 tenths. I'm going to have 1 and 9 tenths. And I'm going to count my hundredths, 1, 2, 3 hundredths. And I would say this number as 1 and 93 hundredths. After we look at our number line, we're going to go ahead and just look at a small place value chart. And I want you to think about what each digit represents and how would we write this decimal fraction as a mixed number. Well, we've done this multiple times now. Go ahead and take a second to pause. Write your number as a write your number as a mixed number so that you can compare your answer to my answer. When I write this number as a mixed number, I'm going to represent the ones as my whole number. So this 3 here represents my whole number because it is a whole number. Then I'm going to transfer this by thinking, oh, this is the fractional part. This means that it is less than 1 whole. So I have 32 hundredths. So I would write 32 hundredths. A really great way to remember how to write the mixed numbers versus the decimal fractions is just say the decimal fraction. So if I were to say this decimal fraction, it would be 3 and 32 hundredths. Then think about how you would say that mixed number or how you would write it. If I look at this mixed number, I would say this as 3 and 32 hundredths. They're exactly the same. Now I've taken that decimal fraction that we had of 3 and 32 hundredths and I turned it into an area model. And as you can see, I have 3 holes. They're colored in completely. And then all the way to the right, I have an area model that is broken up into hundredths. And as you can see, we have 3/10, which matches the 3/10 right here. And then we have 2/100, which match our 2/100 right here. This can really help us order our numbers by looking at the place values in each section. Remember the rules that we were using when we were using whole numbers is the exact same thing. You look at the number that has the greatest value. Placing numbers on number lines can also really help you to determine which numbers are the least and which numbers are the greatest based on how close they are to the number 0 or to the left or to the right of one another. We can also use fractions to help us order numbers from least to greatest, and we can do that by changing them to the same denominators and comparing our numerators. But remember, in order to compare them, you have to have the same denominator. And as you can see, we took the 3 and 32/100 and changed that into a fraction, a mixed number, like we did the first time. We can also use the place value chart in order to help us order numbers from least to greatest by looking at the values. And we should know from ordering whole numbers that you always look to the place value that has the greatest value, which would be the number as far as it can be to the left. So for this number, we would look at our ones place first, and then we would continue to move to the right if they are the same digits. Now we're going to take a look into our stepping stones. The step in on 8.8, it says look at these 6 decimal fractions. Which number is greater, C or F? And how can we figure that out? So first thing we're going to do is look at the 2 numbers that we need, and we're going to write them. We're going to write them up and down so that we can compare the different place values. So the first one we're going to look at is C, and then we're going to look at F. So I have C, which is 2 and 6/10, and then I have F, which is 2 and 43/100. The first thing I want to make sure is that my decimal points are lined up so that all of my place values are lined up. Okay, mine are lined up. I have my ones with the ones, tenths with tenths, and hundredths with hundredths. Now, if it makes it easier for you, you can go ahead and put a placeholder, a 0 here, because 2 and 6/10 is the same as 2 and 60/100. So if that helps, you can do that. So the first value we would look at would be our ones place. They're both the same. So that means we would have to go down and we would have to look at our tenths place. Our tenths are a 6 and a 4. So I automatically know that this 2 and 6/10 is greater because the value in the tenths place is larger. Don't let the hundredths place confuse you. You always look at the greatest valued place first. One thing that is really important when we are working with mixed numbers and number lines is that we know what numbers to place on our number line. So if we're looking at the numbers C and F again, let's look at what our whole numbers could be at the beginning and the end of our number line. So looking at C and looking at F, I know that these numbers have to be between the number 2 and the number 3. The reason is that the whole number is 2, and all of these decimal fractions are less than 1 whole. So if I have the number 2 here and the number 3 here, I want to go ahead and locate those 2 numbers on the number line. If I look at C, that's 2 and 6/10. So I know that there are 10 hops between the 2 and the 3. So I would count my 10 hops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those are my 6/10. That would be 2 and 6/10. That one was pretty easy to locate on the number line. Next, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these hops so I can easily see the rest of the number line. So I can locate the 2 and 43 hundredths. So in doing that, I'm going to jump my tenths, which is 40, or which is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it's not at 2 and 4 tenths, it's at 2 and 43 hundredths. So I kind of have to estimate where the 3 hundredths would be. I think that would be approximately there. So this would be 2 and 43 hundredths. By placing these two numbers on the number line, I am able to easily see that 2 and 43 hundredths is smaller than 2 and 6 tenths, as we had determined by looking at the place values. This time I'm actually going to place the numbers on a place value chart. We did the same thing before, but we didn't use a place value chart. I'm sorry, that should be 2 and 6 tenths. And then the other one is 2 and 43 hundredths. And once again, you're able to see the difference by looking at the ones column first. You see that they are both 2s, so you have to move over to the tenths column, and that shows that the 6 tenths is larger than 4 tenths. Moving on to our step up, question 1, it wants us to compare the different fractions from less than, greater than, and equal to. Remember, you can only compare fractions if they have a common denominator. So for our first one, we have 5 tenths and 8 100ths. So I have to change one of these into a different fraction. So if I look at that, I know that if I do 10 times 10, I will get 100, which is the same denominator that I have in this equation right here. So I'm going to do times 10, and that would give me 50 100ths. So now I know that I can compare 50 100ths and 8 100ths. 50 100ths is greater than 8 100ths. On the second part of my step ahead here, it says these 8 decimal fractions are between 1 and 4. Use the data in the table to answer questions 2 and 3. Use the number line or what you know about equivalent fractions to help you. So you can either place these numbers on the number line, or you can use the place value method that we had talked about earlier. What you're going to do is you are going to put a value in for each of these numbers. So S is 3 and 12 tenths. U is 2 and 3 hundredths. And I'm sorry, I think I said that last number incorrectly. The first one is 3 and 12 hundredths. The second is 2 and 3 hundredths. I'm going to look at the whole numbers, and I see that 3 is larger than 2, so I know that S is greater than U. For the step ahead, it says to write these numbers in order from greatest to least. So make sure that you remember that we are ordering from greatest to least, meaning that your greatest number will be over here and your least number will be over here. For me, I think it's easier to start in the least column, but whichever works best for you is the best method. Now go ahead and complete lesson 8.8 in your stepping stones.